faith, firearms, and freedom. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 25, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Here at Armed Lutheran Radio, we explore the intersection of faith, firearms, and freedom, the Second Amendment, the natural right of self-defense, gun rights and gun control from a uniquely Lutheran perspective. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll enjoy the show, that you'll share it with your friends, that you'll come back again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. If you hear something you'd like to comment on, or you have a question, or if there's a topic that you'd like to hear us explore, please feel free to visit our feedback page, send us an email, or record a voice message using the microphone on your computer. There's a nice button there. Just click that. Record your message and we'll respond to it. We'll play it back on the air. Or you can call 855-54-ARMED and leave us a voicemail. I'd love to hear from you. Be sure while you're there to sign up for our newsletter. Check out Sergeant Bill's very first video Ballistic Minute tip on how to shoot swinging targets. You can find that on the YouTube channel or in the sidebar at armedlutheran.com. Happy Independence Day to everybody. Although if you look around the country more and more, you'll see people willing to give up their independence for free crap paid for by somebody else. It's sad to say Britain is throwing off the shackles of political tyranny at the EU while we're slowly eroding liberty here in the United States at every turn, seems like. Nevertheless, I hope you're celebrating Independence Day with your family and that you stay safe and remember the men, the founders who pledged their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor to the cause of human liberty. I'm on vacation this week, traveling back to North Carolina to visit family, and on today's show, ironically, Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense has a self-defense tip about traveling light. By the way, look in the show notes for links to upcoming training opportunities with Aaron at Fundamental Defense. Be sure to use the promo code Lutheran, and you receive a 20% discount off your registration for any of those courses. He's got courses coming up in July, in September, and in October as well. Sergeant Bill will discuss the intricacies of the slide lock reload in his Ballistic Minute today. Be sure to check out, like I said, be sure to check out his very first Ballistic Minute video tip on YouTube or on the in the sidebar of the website. We're planning to do more videos with Sergeant Bill, so stay tuned for that. And we top off the week with a bizarre article from Sojourners, which Pastor Bennett and I will tear into in the Clinging to God and Guns segment later on in the show. Don't want to miss that. All that is straight ahead right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Hello, this is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Hey, pay attention, because you're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
This past week was a tough one. In a single day, my wife found out that 2 of her former co-workers had been diagnosed with cancer, and the children of a third were now orphans thanks to the cancer that took their mother when they were in elementary school and the heart attack that took their father this past week. Heart disease and cancer are the number 1 and number 2 killers in America by far. But you wouldn't know that listening to the news. What with the incessant hand-wringing about gun violence by the media and the political class. It's easy to forget that in a country of over 300 million people, gun accidents only result in around 500 deaths a year. And look, all those deaths are tragic. I'm not trying to suggest that we should discount them, but we should be serious. Remember how many times we've heard the refrain that if Americans were dying from some disease at the same rate they do from guns, we'd move heaven and earth to find a cure. 33,000 people die every year from guns, they say. If that many people had died from some disease, well, you know the rest. The problem with that myth is that when it comes to death rates, guns don't even register. Heart disease kills over 600,000 people every year. That means you're 18 times more likely to die of a heart attack or a stroke than from gunfire. And every year, another 580,000 die from cancer. And 1.5 million more are diagnosed. 1.2 million people every year die from either cancer or heart disease. And we're going crazy about guns. Gun homicides account for only about 12,000 a year. And the rate of firearm homicide in this country is at its lowest point in something like 50 years. Gun death doesn't even rank in the top 20. So keep that in mind. The next time you hear some anti-gun lunatic go on about the epidemic of gun violence. And please, keep all those suffering and fighting cancer and heart disease and their loved ones in your prayers. And welcome back. It's time now for a self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week's tip comes with a hat tip to my friend and mentor Grant Cunningham, a fellow contributor to the Personal Defense Network. You can find other great tips like this and a lot of good information on personal defense and firearms on his blog at www.grantcunningham.com, which is what's going to inspire today's tip. I travel a lot for work, both on the road and in the air, taking planes to places. You may have a job that requires you to travel, or you may just be planning for a fun family vacation this summer as it starts to get into that time of the year. One of the ways that you can increase your personal safety while traveling is to keep it simple and travel light. Try to carry only as much luggage as you really need to get through the trip, and try to avoid checking bags and stick with carry-ons only as much as possible. Try to get in the mind of the potential attacker. If you see two potential victims, one with both arms covered in bags and dragging an oversized suitcase, huffing and puffing and out of breath, and one potential victim moving briskly through the airport with a backpack on, which one would you choose to attack? That's a pretty easy decision for the attacker. Making yourself as unencumbered as possible when traveling is going to allow you to move more freely and deliberately, and will give you fewer things to occupy your limited mental resources when moving through the public space. As a result, you'll be more alert and aware of your surroundings and able to spot potential pre-attack cues and avoid bad situations more reliably than you would be if you're encumbered by heavy bags that you have to carry around and worry about keeping track of. Not to mention, you won't have to worry about losing your luggage and going through all of that hassle. Anybody who's ever checked baggage before knows what can happen when you have to go to that airline baggage claim and look for a lost bag. It can ruin a trip really easily, so you're going to avoid that as well. Traveling light's an especially important consideration when you're traveling internationally as well. Baggage claim areas at international airports are notorious hangouts for criminals looking to prey on tourists. So if you're going overseas for a vacation this summer, make sure you do your best to try to avoid checking those bags. If you can carry on, you're going to be way better off because you can avoid those baggage claim areas where bad guys look for naive tourists to take advantage of or to victimize and target for crime. If you can stay away from those baggage claims altogether and move quickly and deliberately to your final destination, you're going to be far safer than the alternative. So to summarize, keep it simple and travel light. You'll be less likely to be targeted and more alert and able to respond if you are targeted. If you're worried about packing in a carry-on, there's lots of different travel websites that you can look at. I've gotten full-size suits and ties into carry-ons and been able to carry those without wrinkling them up and that sort of thing. If you use the proper technique, you can carry on even when you need to go on a business trip if you know what you're doing. So look at some of those tips and check out ways that you can fit even wrinkle-free type things like suits that you need to keep nice when you carry on. So just because you're going on a business trip doesn't mean you have to check a bag. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
It's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I'm Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. When someone says we don't need that kind of gun, remind them the Founding Fathers determined what rights our Constitution should protect. There's a world of difference between rights and needs. It is not the function of government to tell us what we need or what we don't. Certainly no one needs an assault rifle or a Saturday Night Special, or for that matter, no one needs a Corvette with a high-capacity horsepower engine capable of speeds to 150 miles per hour. But in the hands of honest, responsible individuals, we have the right of choice. We have the right to read books others don't like. We have the right to listen to any radio program we choose. We have the right to dress the way we want to. We also have the right to own firearms of our choice. So the next time someone tells you, you don't need something, tell them it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. Join the Second Amendment Foundation today so that this message and our Bill of Rights might live. Call 425-454-7012. That's 425-454-7012.
Remember, Armed Lutheran Radio comes with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you are not completely satisfied, the next episode is free.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, this is Sergeant Bill. Today's tip is going to be the anatomy of a slide lock reload. First off, I just got to say that slide lock reload has a lot of moving parts to it, so it's something that you're going to need to practice, and practice it enough that it's going to occur and it's not going to be a process. You're not going to have to work yourself through the steps. You want to do it enough times that you're going to add it to your subconscious skills. So when the gun runs to slide lock, it's time to slide lock reload. Bam, you just do it, it's done, and you move on. There's not a whole lot of thought process going on. You're not working through the steps. And one other thing, if you're shooting any practical pistol sports, you need to know when that slide lock will occur so there's no delay in getting it reloaded. You don't run to slide lock and continue trying to press the trigger and then go, oh, my gun's empty. I need to do something about this. You need to have that set up in your pre-stage plan. I think we covered that. The first thing you need to do is get that magazine out of the gun. But in doing that, you need to bring the gun into your workspace. Your workspace is close to you, not far away. Somewhere in front of your face, not down below it so that you're looking down. You need to keep it up so that it's in your field of view in front of you. You can still see the things that are in front of you because you may be moving. You may have things moving towards you or whatever it may be. But that workspace is in close to you. Some people like to say that you can put your elbow on your ribs or something like that. If that's an index point you want to use so that you go back to it every time, that's great. But bring it in close. Don't try to reload the gun at full reach of your hands because you can't really do that. And you might be able to do it, but you can't do it fast. You can't do it reliably. So most right-handed shooters are going to have to flip the gun in their hand so that they can reach the mag release with their thumb. And that flip is just a little flip motion with your hand so the gun slightly rotates in your hand so you can reach. Some people can reach that magazine. If they have big hands, long fingers, and then you won't have to do that flip, but most shooters have to do that. Now press that button, and while you're dropping that magazine, you need to aggressively, with your weak hand, be going for a fresh magazine. That fresh magazine should be in a pouch on your belt in the same spot it's always at. That way you're not fishing for it. I've seen lots of people at matches that may be new to the sport or just not real serious about it, or even at the range. They'll go to slide lock, they drop the magazine, and then they slowly kind of look down and put their hand down, reaching around their belt or the table, wherever their extra magazine may be, and they're, just trying to find it. You need to do it quickly. If it's a practical pistol match, you want to do it as quickly and as efficiently as you can. If it's self-defense motivated, you really want to be able to do it quickly and efficiently without looking for it. Okay, so you got your weak hand to that magazine. You want to index that fresh magazine. That means grab it with your palm on the base of the magazine, your index finger down along the front of the magazine where the bullets point. Your other finger is going to wrap around the magazine so that you've got a good firm grip on it. Now your strong hand needs to reacquire the grip and position the mag well for that mag insertion. So as you're regripping, and you need to turn that gun so that the magazine well is pointed so that you can slightly see into the mag well and that it's ready to take that magazine. So you pull the magazine off your belt, drop your elbow to rotate it up, and that's the position you need to stop for a second when you're practicing this and getting this motion down, and see where that magazine is positioned so that you can try to match the mag well to where that magazine is so that it's just going to be an easy insertion. Look into the mag well. I like to paint an index spot with either red or white paint, a focus spot. Something that when I rotate that magazine, that pistol around, that I have that focus spot, that place to look at where I'm trying to put that magazine into the gun. It's just a basic hand-eye coordination thing. If you look at a spot and you're trying to put something to that spot, if you're looking at it, it's a lot easier to get it where you're looking. So a little dot of paint to give you that little focus spot works wonders. You might need to pause ever so slightly just before you put the magazine into the gun, into that mag well. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. That pause will be more minimized. But when you do insert it, you need to insert it firmly with one motion. You don't need to slap it in. If you put it and seat it with one firm motion, it's going to seat that magazine into the gun and you'll be good to go. Now you need to activate the slide release. Most right-handed shooters will do that with their offhand. Some will actually reach over and rack the slide, however you feel is necessary to do it. I say use the slide release. I know a lot of people are going to say, but Sarge, that's a fine motor skill, and you lose fine motor skills under stress. Well, this is what I have to say to that. If you practice something enough, it becomes subconscious. A subconscious action is different than a conscious action. You will lose some motor skills under stress, but if you're consciously trying to think of get through, do this, do that, then that's when your motor skills are going to be degraded. But if it's something that you don't even have to think about doing, it's not as bad. Perfect example, fighter pilots. They practice and practice and practice. If you ever go to YouTube and look up any of the footage from any fighter pilot from any of the wars where they had video, I mean there's lots of them, Vietnam, Gulf Wars, all kinds of stuff. You see all the instruments, all the buttons, all the controls they have. How would it be possible if they didn't have fine motor skills to do that stuff? And that's life and death, high stress situations. If they can do it because they practice it and they made it a subconscious skill, you can too. So you've released the slide. Now you need to regrip the gun and press out. At the same time, you're regripping it and or maybe you're releasing the slide and regripping it and then pressing the gun out to the sight's position. You want to put all those motions in together as much as you can. Efficient, quickly, smoothly, go to the sights. You're ready to make another shot. Okay, for the southpaws out there like myself, the only differences to it is I use my trigger finger to press my magazine release button. I still have to reacquire my grip because to reach back with my index finger, my grip tends to turn a little bit on onto the grip of the gun. And when I go to do the slide release, I actually reach under the gun with my offhand, which is my right hand, and use my fingertips to press the slide release. Now, if you have an ambidextrous slide release on your gun, which a lot of newer guns are starting to have them, one that comes to mind is the SIG 320, you can do the same thing as a right-hander. You can just press with your offhand thumb that slide release, and away you go. You'll be rolling out, reacquiring your grip, pressing out to that sight's position to acquire your next target, take your next shot. It sounds like a lot, but once you work on it, if you've never done it before, all these little pieces are going to go together a lot faster, and it's going to be a lot more simple than it sounds. You drop the mag, you grab another one, you insert it, release the slide, roll out to sights, and you're good to go. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill. Keep practicing.
If you carry a gun for personal protection, it's imperative that you get a good holster. When I started out, I had no idea what that meant, and I went through a bunch of really bad holsters. Then I found Cook's Holsters at cooksholsters.com. Cook's Holsters are custom made to fit your specific firearm. Available in lots of colors, including custom printed Kydex. Cook's Holsters are made in the USA and the great state of Georgia and come with a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get a 15% discount off everything in the store. You put a lot of time and money into the firearm you choose to carry for personal protection. Carry it in the best holster. cooksholsters.com.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another episode of Clinging to God and Guns with our good friend Pastor John Bennett from St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. Welcome back, Pastor. We've got a doozy for you today.
Yes, we do. Think it's good to be with you.
This one comes to us from Sojourners, also known as sojo.net, from the editor at Ministry Matters, master's degree in theological studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School, Mark Lockard, who looks like maybe he's okay. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to try to be good. Put the best construction on everything. He looks like Pajama Boy. Let's just put it that way. This one's called "Making Guns Our God," and this is from August of last year, so almost a year old. This may be a long segment because there's so much here for us to comment on. Pastor, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit. I know I am. So here we go. It's difficult to write critically about guns in America, not because there aren't clear or definitive statements to make, but because you know exactly what kind of responses you'll get before you type your first word. Guns are a passionate topic in a land that includes right to their ownership, though most ignore the, quote, well-regulated militia part in its highest legal document. I'm confident that as you're reading this, several comments will be posted by people who read only the title and began typing. I'll let you address the militia part, but that sounds a lot like projection to me.
Yes. Well, what we'll see in this article is that it's one pathetic straw man argument after the other. And I guess I'll give him credit for his first straw man argument here. He almost makes it. He kind of walks right up to the line and then stops. But it sounds like he's alluding to that old liberal talking point that the Second Amendment is only to be understood as far as the ownership goes within the context of a well-regulated militia. And then the argument goes from there that, well, that means only military and law enforcement.
Right.
So But I would remind Mr. Lockhart and all liberals out there, for that matter, the exact text of the Second Amendment, including the punctuation. The punctuation is very important. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, that comma is very important.
Right.
The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, the framers put that comma in there. That comma is very important because it's saying these two things are two separate issues.
Well, and the framers also recognized, and it's been upheld and affirmed by subsequent Supreme Court and other court rulings that the militia is everybody.
Right.
It's the people.
Right. Very clear if you read both Mason and Madison's notes, since they were the primary authors of the Second Amendment, that the purpose was so that the citizenry be armed in the event that the government became a tyranny such as it had been under good old King Georgie. Just looking at one thing that I like to do, and when we look at some of these authors, I like to look at what else they've written just to get an idea of where they stand politically. I'll read you.
You read his blog, The Disembodied Beard, did you?
The Disembodied Beard. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but capitalism's primary animating value is scarcity. This logic, that there isn't enough, pulls every other human value into its matrix of scarcity. Time, money, natural resources, love, companionship, beauty. All these and more are stripped of their ultimate value and defined instead by fear, anxiety, and the will to power. How ironic that capitalism generates so much waste, a surplus so tremendous that no one in an earlier age could possibly imagine it, while so many go hungry. So, what does that tell you about Mr. Locke?
He's going to be voting for Bernie Sanders?
Probably. Or he might hold his nose and vote for Hillary if she's the nominee.
Right.
But it's pretty clear we're dealing with a capitalist-hating leftist. So, just want to put that out there for all of your listeners.
Just
that
to provide a little context.
Yes. So his stance on guns is very consistent with his political philosophy.
Yeah. And what I meant earlier about the projection part was interesting. I mean, we're just 2 paragraphs in, but he's already suggesting here that, there's going to be people who come onto this article and they're going to make these knee-jerk reactions without even reading it. And basically the suggestion is it's going to be the pro-gun people who immediately poo-poo the whole article without reading it, when it's really it's the anti-gun left and their zero tolerance policies and their safe spaces that won't listen to any opinion that differs from their own.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
And here he really, the next couple of paragraphs, he really frames it, and you get an idea of where he's coming from. It's frustrating and defeating whether I'm thinking about the issue religiously, socially, logically, emotionally, or any other possible way. It's incredibly hard not to be cynical, which I was, after hearing about the deaths of 2 local television employees in Virginia, shot dead live on the air by a former coworker. 2 young people cut down and added to the ever-swelling tally of those dead by gun in the United States. It's frustrating that there is sharp disagreement among Americans on the realities of gun violence. There's no disagreement on the realities, but okay, I digress. Let me finish. There are few issues in this country that create such seemingly irreconcilable division as gun ownership and its results. I'm fully aware that nothing I say here will change anyone's deep-seated beliefs. See,
then why are you writing?
Right. Pajama Boy here is frustrated that gun owners won't give up their rights and agree with him. That's what he's basically saying. He's not really frustrated by the lack of communication on both sides or the lack of a meaningful discussion. He's frustrated that pro-gun people have such deep-seated beliefs. Commenter,
which isn't any different than his deep-seated beliefs.
Exactly. Commenters may call me out as naive, stupid, or against freedom, however ambiguously that is defined. And let me add to that, short-sighted, arrogant, moronic, clueless, but I can go on, but we got to finish this article. Others may share this article with their like-minded friends, perhaps offering a hearty amen with it. Both will be affirmed among their community of believers. Personally, I'm not sure there's any progress to be made. Sadly, I agree with Dan Hodges, and I have no clue who Dan Hodges is, but he posts here a tweet from this Dan Hodges person, and he says, in retrospect, Sandy Hook marked the end of the U.S. gun control debate. Once America decided killing children was bearable, it was over.
Yeah, you have this quote that once America decided killing children was bearable, that this debate was over. And I really have to take both Mr. Lockhart and this Mr. Hodges to task. No one ever said in response to Sandy Hook that killing children was bearable. But that is the impression that they give.
Mm-hmm.
But the second part of this is that our political system and our society in general has made the slaughter of unborn children not only bearable, but the left has called it a constitutionally protected right.
Right. Exactly.
And that's where I take great offense at this statement.
This is why this guy is so frustrated. We don't kill children. We don't think it's bearable. We're not so blindly naive, though, to think that background checks and bans on standard capacity magazines or modern sporting rifles will do anything to change the situation. And he's frustrated because we want the violence to... He thinks we don't want the violence to stop because we love our guns too much. When in truth,
right,
we would love the violence to stop, but we're not willing to give up our freedom for quote-unquote solutions that aren't going to do anything to actually solve the problem.
You know, as you read through his article, it's very clear his solution is to disallow personal ownership of firearm. His solution, if implemented, would cause the violence and the crime to skyrocket.
Absolutely. Still, our author continues, cynicism isn't where I want to land. It certainly isn't prophetic. I may not be able to sway anyone by arguing that allegiance to gun ownership in the face of the deathly realities it brings our neighbors day after day is antithetical to Christ's identity as peacegiver, but giving up and choosing out of my own resignation not to speak isn't keeping with that Christian identity either. Speaking out against the epidemic that is gun worship and the violence it spreads might be the only Christian action I can take, at least as long as substantive change appears out of reach. No, speaking out is not the only thing you can do as a Christian. And the fact that he thinks that this is all he can do tells me he's a fake Christian.
Well, he's, as we see quite often, he is confusing his political advocacy with the Christian faith.
Yes. Well, the first thing he could do is pray, right? And the next thing,
right.
The next thing as Christians, that's the first thing we ought to do about pretty much everything. But if you have an issue that you truly care about, like gun violence, like violence in general, prayer is the first thing we should be doing. Next, recognize we live in a sinful, fallen world, right? I mean,
right.
We can't stop it. As long as we live here on this earth, there's gonna be sin ever since the fall, and we can try to defend against it. We can lock our doors. We can pass all the laws we want, but it's a result of our fall into sin, and there's nothing we can do. It's gonna happen.
Right.
So,
and the other thing that I look at too is you're talking about solutions. His solution is to take guns away, which isn't the solution at all.
Right.
What about community outreach? Working with these communities where they have gun violence to try and get these young people on the right path to keep them from being involved in gangs and so forth.
Absolutely.
We could, with all the efforts that politicians put into gun control, if they instead put that into community outreach, how much better would these communities be?
get to work with these kids so that they know that there are other options. Their lives have some other destination other than prison or death or both.
Right.
Work to promote, marriage and families. Work with convicted felons to try and, help them transition back to life in society so that they're less likely to commit crimes again when they get out. Get off their duffs and stop whining about guns and actually live this faith that they claim that they have to do something to make a difference. But I guess that's too much work. It's easier to sit in your mom's basement and blog about their beard and about the evils of capitalism and stigmatize gun owners and blame guns for all the violence than it is to actually do something.
Right. Yeah, your average keyboard commando thinks that they're somehow doing society some service by sharing their opinions, which don't matter much at all.
And he's got a master's degree. And he's still doing it. So let me be clear about where I stand, and here he comes right out at it. I don't have a problem with hunting rifles used to hunt animals for food. Other than that, I'm opposed to civilian gun ownership.
Most of these articles that we've looked at so far, they've at least tried to make the argument that somehow firearm ownership isn't a Christian virtue.
Mm-hmm.
At least he's being honest that he's saying that he doesn't think anybody should own firearms. Well, that's good and all, but that's not a realistic expectation. But backing up just a little bit here, there was a comment that he had given that just absolutely blew my mind as sheer idiocy.
Which one?
It's hard to choose. Well, he says allegiance to gun ownership in the face of the deathly realities it brings our neighbors day after day is antithetical to Christ's identity as peacegiver. So the argument that he's making is that simply owning a gun brings deathly realities upon our neighbors day after day.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most absurd statement I've ever heard from an anti-gun loon. It truly is. But he's also stating that ownership is antithetical to Christ's identity as peacekeeper. I've mentioned this before on your program, but the peace that Jesus brings is regarding an eternal reality, because Jesus, on multiple occasions, points out that by believing in him, a person will encounter a great deal of turmoil in this life. So, and the second thing that I want to point out here is that he says, speaking out against the epidemic that is gun worship and the violence it spreads might be the only Christian action I can take. We touched on that a little bit already. But the last time I checked, no one is bowing down in worship to their guns. I certainly like my guns, but the last time I checked, I'm not praying to them. I'm not singing hymns of praise to them.
No.
They serve a purpose to me and my family.
And again, he reinforces this, remember in the second paragraph where he talked about how he was frustrated with all of our deep-seated beliefs, right? But here he's got one himself. Maybe his deep-seated hatred for civilian gun ownership is maybe that's a hindrance to progress on the issue. Guns are made for dealing death. And if they're not made for the death of an animal, that means they're made for the death of a human. Or zombies. Zombies too. And given that reality, I see no way to reconcile owning handguns, assault rifles, and the like with the reality of Christ, which is fundamentally about dealing life, not death. I expect to have several arguments quoted at me. One will be the right to self-defense and the preservation of one's own life in the face of danger, to which I say, if the arguer is a Christ follower, that Christ himself rebuked the use of a sword upon his own capture, knowing capture meant his own death and the possible deaths of those associated with him. How do you graduate Vanderbilt Divinity School with a master's degree and get this so wrong?
Well, I'm going to just go out on a limb here and guess that Vanderbilt is probably rather liberal in their theology department. But this is like, preschool, Sunday school lesson stuff that he's getting wrong here. He's completely missed the point of that interaction between Christ and Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus was intently resolute to suffer and to die for the salvation of sinners. Of course, Jesus didn't want Peter to stop that from happening. Jesus came into this world for the express purpose of being betrayed into the hands of the chief priests and scribes, being flogged, being crucified, dying, and rising again for our salvation.
And Peter's action was getting in the way of him fulfilling his mission.
Yeah, and it's but then again, as we've seen time and time before, that political philosophy often trumps Christian truths, and that's what we see here. But it's incredibly poor theology and scholarship to take this one incident where there was an expressed reason why Jesus stopped Peter, and to then somehow blanketly apply that to gun ownership in general, to use this to support this liberal notion that somehow gun ownership and the Christian faith are incompatible with each other.
Well, and it's even worse because he just takes one sentence out of that story. He says more to Peter than just put your sword away. And then he says, do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? If he didn't want to be arrested and taken to the cross, he could have stopped it. He didn't need Peter's intervention.
He could have stopped it by nonviolent means even. As we see in that same narrative when they come asking for Jesus of Nazareth and he says, I am he, they fall down.
Right.
We also have another silly straw man argument here, if you caught that, going back to where he says guns are made for dealing death.
Oh, yes.
So guns are evil because their purpose is to cause the death of a human. But that's absolute garbage. We're talking about an inanimate object. And it isn't evil simply because it's capable of being used for evil. If that were the case, it would make you a hypocrite if you were a Christian and owned anything with a sharp blade.
Right.
Something's capacity for causing evil is not what makes it evil.
Now, this next one is a doozy. As if, I know the first half of this was a doozy, but where does the insanity stop?
Sadly, I don't think it does.
No, based on the next paragraph. I think you're right.
Oh.
We must also examine the claim of self-defense when it comes to guns, as they aren't elements of defense in the first place. As Professor Adam Kotsko said rather well, and I haven't looked up who Adam Kotsko is, but this is from apparently his Facebook page, this professor. Guns are devices for causing grave bodily injury up to and including death. That's their express purpose. Pretending that the purpose of a gun is to, quote, defend yourself is a euphemism and sophistry. You cannot directly, quote, defend yourself using a gun. It's not a shield or a barricade. Nor can you shoot bullets that will intercept or deflect those being shot at you. You quote...
It happens in Hollywood.
It does... You quote-unquote defend yourself with a gun only indirectly by threatening to kill someone or actually wounding or killing them. That's called deterrence, you moron! I'm sorry. Lord, forgive me. I'm sorry. Good grief. How do you get degrees, be professors, and be this dense?
Well, fortunately, you're talking to a pastor, so I can absolve you, but now I need someone to absolve me too, because this is just insanity.
I guess our military should be giving up bombs and guns and missiles because you can't defend with those, right?
Right. But, this is one of those examples of why words are important and the meanings of those words are important. This argument that a gun isn't a defensive weapon because you can't shield yourself with it. Let's just take a quick look at Webster's dictionary of how it defines the word defend.
Mm-hmm.
One definition is to drive danger or attack away. Another is to take action against attack or challenge. One other definition that I found as provided by Google is to resist an attack made on someone or something to protect from harm or danger. So when it comes down to it, by all accounts, when you consider the definition of the word defend, firearms are both an offensive and a defensive weapon because they are used to repel an attack.
Right. Maybe our professor needs to go back and take remedial English. I guess we need to arm our police and our soldiers with shields, and the Christian armies of Europe, as you pointed out, maybe they should have just given up their swords and, fallen back behind the walls of Venice. This is how I'd also respond to the other argument I know will be thrown at me, just war theory. I'll be told that as they read it, St. Augustine long ago laid out a clear understanding of how and when Christians should deal death, to which I can only say, quote, I don't buy it.
Doesn't matter whether or not he buys it. It's not brighter than St. Augustine.
That's right. I knew St. Augustine, and you ain't no St. Augustine. That's what my grandfather would say. Well, I do think there are situations in which violent conflict can be justified. Didn't he just contradict himself? The classic example being fighting to bring down Nazi Germany in World War II. I don't think it can ever be done so in Christian terms. Theologically, we cannot agree if you assert that killing of any kind can be justified in the name of Christ. I believe this for the reasons given above, namely that Jesus lived, died, and lived again to affirm the blessedness and sanctity of the lives we live together. No, that's not why he died. And
no, but I will give him credit for one thing here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling generous. He says, theologically, we cannot agree if you assert that killing of any kind can be justified in the name of Christ.
Right.
I would agree with him on that.
I'll concede that.
Yes. There's nowhere in Scripture where our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, instructs us to kill someone.
No.
So, anytime a person kills in the name of Christ, not only are they sinning against those whom they have killed if they were killed innocently, but he's also sinning against Christ by claiming Christ as some way giving him the right and authority to do so.
Right.
And I think of when we see these wackos that kill abortion doctors, Christ has not commanded you to do that, but they somehow in their twisted mind think that that's the case. But what we have here is once again he's setting up a straw man argument.
Right.
If we were to go through this article and count them, we could probably take another hour just picking apart the straw man arguments. But he's assuming that it is true that the Christian who believes in the reality of a just war likewise believes that killing in the name of Christ is acceptable.
Nobody's arguing that.
Right, but that's basically where he's going.
That's exactly where he's going, and that this is sounds like 3/4 of the speeches you hear Obama give.
Right.
You ask him a question or you make some assertion, and he responds with some ridiculous straw man some assertion that you never made. This is no one is claiming that we're killing in Christ's name or we're defending our life in the name of Christ. We don't go to war in our vocation as Christians. We don't we didn't go to war against Nazi Germany to spread Christianity.
Right. Yeah, it's what, as far as I take it, what he is arguing is that if you believe in the just war theory, you therefore believe that it is acceptable to kill in the name of Christ. But it's pretty clear, though, that he doesn't understand the just war. He calls it the just war theory. I call it the just war principle, because it's not a theory.
Right.
It's a reality. He's making the assumption that a Christian cannot participate in war because the sanctity of life trumps the use of force.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask Mr. Lockhart if he's ever read the Old Testament.
Right. Yeah.
Hello. Where you have God directly commanding, as he spoke through Moses, to engage in acts of war.
Yeah, but the New Testament replaces all that stuff, you know.
But I want to clarify, though, what he calls the just war theory, or as I call it, the just war principle, because obviously he's confused on what it is. But here's what the just war principle is. The Christian, by virtue of his Christian freedom and by virtue of his obedience to the state as it's laid out for us in Romans chapter 13, may in good conscience engage in war, so long as the purpose of that war is to defend that which is good against that which is evil, and that the desired outcome of the war is one that is moral and ethical. But I'd like to point out just how inconsistent he is, because he's making this leap now that somehow Christians can't serve as soldiers. He has on the disembodied beard, he has another article titled, or a blog post titled, "The Myth of Christian Voting." And here's what he writes. What? Being a Christian really isn't a matter of civic responsibility. The thing is, you are a Christian apart from your role in the citizenry, and the two identities have very little to do with each other. So it's very contradictory.
That's exactly. Apparently his maybe his blog posts have an expiration date. His opinions, he forgets what he wrote and then, you know, goes on to the next one, and whatever he writes today is what he means. You know, we had this interview with Pastor Wolfmueller recently, and we were talking about the three estates and the old monastic idea, the old the medieval idea that you had these vocations, that these estates, that you were in one of the three, but you couldn't be in more than one. And Luther recognized that you could be both a Christian and a soldier. You could be both a member of the state and a member of the family. They overlap each other.
Right.
And this idea that Christian and citizen don't have any relation to one another is just that's like a whole new monasticism. That's kooky.
Yeah, you know, and he even goes so far as to use the example of fighting against Nazi Germany in World War II, and says, while I do think there are situations in which violent conflict can be justified, such as fighting the Nazis,
right,
I don't think it can ever be done so in Christian terms. So it is then unchristian to fight against Nazi Germany. That's the logical conclusion based on what he said.
Oh man, my head hurts trying to figure this out.
But here's something to consider as we think about, you know, he's dismissing the just war principle. He is basically saying that it is not possible for a faithful Christian to also serve as a soldier. If we look at the wars that have been waged throughout our nation's history,
mm-hmm.
We want Christians on the battlefield. We want people on the battlefield who have a moral compass other than what they are commanded to do by their superiors.
Oh, amen. Yes.
We look at what's happened with ISIS, that they have no problem slaughtering innocent civilians, of raping young women and murdering young boys. They have absolutely no problem for that because their moral compass is completely shattered into a million pieces.
And we have this, it's become sort of the moral or the social justice cause celeb in recent years is this whole issue of police brutality. Imagine if one of the prerequisites for becoming a police officer was you can't be Christian.
Right.
You think we have a problem with police brutality now? Imagine if there was no moral compass.
Right. And, not to completely dismiss the ability for a non-Christian to behave in a moral way, but
right.
In times of war is the ugliest reality that a person must face in this life. And when you have that moral compass, when you have that Christian faith, that dictates your behavior on the battlefield. That dictates whether or not in the time of absolute bloodshed that you're going to do your best to prevent the loss of innocent life, even if it's the civilians of the nation that you are fighting against.
Right. So yeah, okay, killing in Christ's name, never okay, got that. But self-defense and defending the innocent against murder or tyranny and genocide, that's sort of, to me, that's the ultimate act of love towards our neighbors, right?
Right. When Jesus said, greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends,
mm-hmm.
How does that apply to times, we're talking about soldiers on the battlefield. How does that apply to those in our military? I have a friend of mine who lost his leg in Afghanistan as a medic running to the aid of another man who had stepped on an IED.
Mm.
He did that out of duty, but I would also argue that he did that out of Christian love.
Right. And our intrepid author concludes this nonsense with this paragraph. The Christ I know is one of life and peace, even in the face of death. Christ shows us that even if we can't avoid death, much as we might like to because we are human and a fear of death is natural, we know that life wins out. This is what we're asked to affirm when faced with the empty tomb, losing our fear of harm and death and lifting up a Savior who delights in lives lived fully is our Christian call. Why can't we trust in that more than a gun?
What I find insulting here, he is making the assertion that there is something wrong with our faith if we feel the necessity to own a firearm for the purposes of protecting ourselves.
Right.
But what I would remind him of is that owning an inanimate object and being a Christian are things that are very compatible with one another.
If the guy kicking in my door is coming to kill me because I'm a Christian, that's one thing. But we're not talking about persecution for our faith, which is what Christ was warning us about.
Right.
But if we're just dealing with some meth head gangbanger lowlife, that's different. And Christ never calls on us to submit to that kind of evil.
Right.
And I just can't figure out where people like our author get the idea that that's what we're supposed to do as Christians.
It brings to mind a quote by Mark Levin, the radio host. As he often talks about these liberal Jews, is that their religion is liberalism. And when your religion is liberalism, no matter how much you might say you're a Christian, your opinions aren't going to be governed by your faith. They're going to be governed by your liberalism.
Yep, very true. And we see that in so many of these articles that their political viewpoint overrides their religious viewpoints and their understanding of Christ and His Word.
Sad but true.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about covered it. I don't know that either of us could probably handle any more insanity today.
This makes you want to go sit down and have a beer.
Amen to that. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right. And thank you all for listening. Tune in again next time. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to send us an email, armedlutheranradio@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED. Let us know what you think of this particular article or our dissection of it. Tune in again next time for another episode of Clinging to God and Guns right here on Armed Lutheran Radio. And that's going to wrap it up for this week. Special thanks to all my contributors, Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense, Sergeant Bill Silvia, and Pastor John Bennett for their contributions to the show. I am on vacation, as I said, this week, so I'm not sure what next week's show is going to sound like. Might come up with something special. We'll just have to wait and see. It will be a surprise. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for subscribing to Armed Lutheran Radio. Christ's blessings on your week. Remember, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @ArmedLutheran and like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/TheArmedLutheran. You can contact us by email at armedlutheranradio@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.